I'm going to talk briefly here about second order consequences. I think this is sort of the positive spin of unintended consequences. But I think when you look at how new technologies and platforms roll out, it's very difficult at the start to predict where it's going to go. So if we look at mobile internet, for example, those of you that are old enough to remember the early days of BlackBerry, it started out with email. And then maybe you would get your weather on there and maybe look at some stock prices kind of thing. And it evolved to what we see today. So you look at today and we have things like Instagram, Uber, Car2Go. Nobody was sitting at the start saying, I wish someone would invent a smartphone so I can get my Car2Go business off the ground. And quite frankly, Car2Go doesn't work if you don't have a mobile device. This is the concept of second order consequences. It's very hard to predict the impact on other industries as we start to roll out new platforms. So let's walk through a scenario here. For example, autonomous vehicles. I think this is everybody's vision of what an autonomous vehicle would look like. You sit in the car, you don't need to touch the pedals or the steering wheel, and it gets you to where you want to go. What if this was your car in the autonomous vehicle? It's now not, a steering wheel thing anymore. This becomes your living room, maybe your meeting room, your office, whatever it is that you want to do during that time. How does that affect all these other industries? So for example, there's all kinds of studies that have proven if they can get 10% of the cars on the road to be autonomous, the number of accidents is going to drop off significantly in the order of 50 to 70%. What does that do to the insurance industry? What does that do to the auto body industry? For example, I work with an insurance company, and one of the problems that they're facing now is Volvo has started to include insurance with the price of your vehicle when you buy a new Volvo. So while the underwriters are still involved, the entire broker industry is completely removed from that market. So huge impact on the insurance industry. As we start to move further down the line, we have things like parking. We look at parking, for example, in downtown Calgary or downtown Edmonton, very expensive. If my car can drop me off at the office and then head out to the outskirts of town instead of having to park downtown, what's that going to do to parking rates? Even better, what if my car drops me off and then rents itself out for the day as a self-driving Uber and generates income for me, and then I send it a text when I'm ready to leave work and it comes back and picks me up? How is that going to affect things like real estate in downtown, some of the taxes and fees that are associated with parking for municipalities, that kind of stuff, all the way over to things like real estate. So if we look at a city like Calgary, why is the real estate in downtown Calgary 3 to 4 times what it is in Airdrie? Well, it's people don't want to sit in their car on the Deerfoot if there's an accident for 2 hours, a couple times a week. What happens when that congestion goes away? Or even if the congestion is slightly better, if this is your car, it now becomes productive time. And you're not sitting there, being frustrated because you can't get things done. All of a sudden that commute changes. What does that do to real estate prices when you start to look at stuff in the core of the city versus on the outskirts of town? So there's all kinds of sort of secondary industries and secondary consequences that will come out of the rollout of things like autonomous vehicles. Tied into that is this concept of what we call 3 horizons. So we work with organizations around how can they continue to grow their business. As I mentioned before on the Kodak example, I think, you look here as Horizon 1. I think it was a really smart move by Kodak to try and maximize the revenue that they can get from their film industry. That should be the easiest revenue you can get. Ideally, as your product or service matures, you should be able to drive cost out of delivering that service to increase your margins. And you need that sort of engine, if you will, to fund the future stuff. The Horizon 2 is sort of really close adjacent markets and customers so that, as you look for other opportunities, ideally what you want to do is leverage some of your existing investment. And we've got lots of examples where organizations have done exactly this and expanded into other markets without having to build something completely from scratch. And then Horizon 3 is an example of how do we create entirely new lines of business? And, I've got multiple examples of organizations that, we hear a lot about data analytics. As they've started to gather data through their product offerings in Horizon 1 and 2, they've literally been able to look at the data that they've captured and understand that there's opportunities for entirely new lines of business and have successfully gotten into completely different markets. this is something that we can help organizations get through to figure out where can they play beyond their current focus, if you will, both from a sort of near-term future as well as a longer term.